So, as Trump touted, it appears Ukraine will sign the deal over U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral deposits. Will the deal be a foundation for lasting peace or merely an unfair bargain? We are joined by Professor Andrew Millard this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, is signing the deal the best that Ukraine can do at this stage? I mean, Trump says Ukraine has no card to play.
Right. So, this morning we woke up and it seems like the deal has been agreed, and probably Zelenskyy will travel to Washington on Friday to sign this deal. To answer your question, unfortunately, it seems like, yes, right now, based on the current situation, this is the best deal that the Ukrainians can get. And really, if we look at the whole picture, nothing much has changed. The Ukrainian position hasn't changed, the Russian position hasn't changed, the European position, Chinese position, and so on. The only major change has been the US foreign policy, which has had a major U-turn. And that means that the Ukrainian government, President Zelenskyy, has just one question to ask. Can they sustain their own defenses against Russia for at least the next 4 years without US support? And the basic answer is no, which means they're basically being forced into signing this rather unfair agreement.
Well, Ukraine is hoping to be involved in those peace talks that Trump and Putin are carrying out as soon as possible. When do you think Ukraine will actually be invited to that peacemaking talks? I mean, when will Putin and Trump actually allow Ukraine to play an active role in the peacemaking process?
Well, this is a very good question. So far, it seems like the US government, especially President Trump, seems to be dictating everything that is happening. So it's definitely a US-led negotiation that is happening. The fact that we potentially do have this Ukrainian-US deal, it's a good first step. Potentially then the next step would be some sort of US-Russian agreement. And then I think once they have those in place, then they will bring all three together, in which case, then we have to start negotiating the trickier aspect of territory. So as we know, Russia has claimed about 20% of Ukrainian territory. The Ukrainians are still in the Kursk region of Russia. So now the trickier aspect of what territory remains where, that will be when all leaders need to come together.
And this peacemaking process is not just about the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. Some countries, including Japan, appear to be not as proactive when it comes to aiding Ukraine anymore. Is it because of its relations with Washington? I mean, are countries like Japan walking on eggshells?
To a degree, yes. So if we look back for the past 3 years, Japan has been very strong in its support for Ukraine. Right from the very start, it criticized the Russian government, criticized the invasion, provided a huge amount of humanitarian support, financial support, also technological aid. So for the energy sector, which has been very badly hit in Ukraine. In fact, Japan has been, I think, the second largest individual donor to Ukraine, and that's been very consistent. However, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago when I was on here before, Japan, the Prime Minister Ishiba, just visited the US. So it's very clear that Japan also is, nuchibo wiseo, as they say in Korean, thinking about the US relationship as well.
Well, Professor Millard, then what do you think is the likelihood that Trump will urge other countries to chip in to end the Ukraine war? I mean, will Trump demand anything to any countries?
Well, we've been seeing, even if you go back to President Trump's first term in office, NATO was one of his big issues, asking the Europeans to pay more for European defense. And this Ukrainian war, President Trump sees as a European war. And so he's going to very much focus on this idea that any sort of peace agreement will not involve US troops, but it will involve the European militaries maintaining peace, so peacekeeping missions in Ukraine carried out by the Europeans. And already we've seen this week, the United Kingdom government has increased or will propose an increase of its own defense spending up to 2.5%. The newly elected German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he's also immediately been looking at how to expand European defense spending. So this is really where we can see Trump's sort of issues already starting to take effect.
Well, it can be good news for the Ukrainian people if the war does finally come to an end. Or will Ukrainians not be happy that Trump and Putin are leading the peacemaking? I mean, would you say Zelensky's leadership is at risk now?
Oh, I mean, firstly, we can say that any sort of peace deal, any sort of ceasefire is a good thing on the whole. But of course, if I was a Ukrainian, I would 100% not be very happy that Donald Trump is now favoring the Russians, and that really any sort of agreement that comes out, the Russians are likely going to end up as the winners out of all of this. So President Zelensky generally has had fairly good popularity ratings. How that will change if he is forced into signing a very unfair agreement, we'll see how that goes. But potentially, this could be the end for Zelensky.
Right. Zelensky does have a lot on his shoulders. Professor Millard, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.